Hey everybody, I've got some new Patreon supporters I want to thank. Todd Ulizio, Martin Beauchamp, Lee Hopkins, and R.A. Burrell. These four guys signed up to support the podcast on either a monthly or annual basis through Patreon. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to mountainandprairie.com/support for both information on Patreon and other ways you can support the podcast. But I've said it before, I'll say it again and again and again. Patreon is the financial foundation of all things Mountain and Prairie. So thank you to these four guys, and thank you to everybody else who's supported over the years. This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Anna Borgman. Anna is a Montana-based butcher, chef, and writer whose work focuses on helping people better understand and appreciate the origins of their food. Whether she's writing an article for Stephen Rinella's MeatEater or helping to field harvest and process a bison, Anna has a gift for helping curious, conscientious people become more educated about the impacts of their food choices. And as you'll hear in this conversation, her enthusiasm and authenticity are infectious. Even after more than an hour of chatting, I felt like we only scratched the surface. Anna grew up in Oregon, and thanks to her participation in Forage, she's been involved with animals and livestock from a very early age. During her teenage years, skiing became her primary passion, and she devoted much of her post-college life to spending as many days as possible in the mountains, oftentimes working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Eventually, through a serendipitous chain of events that we discuss, she found her way into culinary school, which was her gateway into the world of meat and butchery. Through all the various stages of Anna's career, she's brought intense devotion, possibly even obsession, to her work, which has resulted in a fascinating life trajectory that's both inspiring and instructive. Anna and I share so many mutual friends, and I've been hearing about her and her work for many years now, so I was thrilled to finally have her join me for a podcast conversation. We started out talking about her childhood in Oregon and how skiing became her primary focus for so many years. We talk about some of her adventurous international travel experiences and how those places and the characters she met along the way led her into the world of food. We talk about the upsides of obsession, advice for getting out of ruts, the value of curiosity, and the importance of experiencing other cultures. She also talks in detail about the realities of slaughtering livestock, why she feels such a connection to butchery, her favorite books, and much more. Even though this was my first time meeting Anna, I felt like I was chatting with an old friend. I'm super inspired by all of her work, but even more inspired by the focus and passion that she brings to everything she does. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So, Anna, people have been telling me for many years that I needed to talk to you, and I'm sorry it took this long, but we've already been talking now for quite a while, and so I'm glad I finally hit the record button. But I was going through, in not a weird stalker way, but in a researching way, I was going through your Instagram this morning, actually, and I found a really awesome caption that I think I've really connected with, and I'm gonna read it. Sorry for my bad reading skills, but I'm going to read it because I think it's so interesting, and I think it's such a great summary of you and your life. All right, so here we go. I've had a few people over the last few years ask me what my 5-year plan was. Let me tell you, I despise that question. If you asked me 5 years ago what I'd be doing today, I would not have guessed it in 1,000 tries. I would not have imagined living a life that put me out in the middle of the sagebrush at sunrise at North Bridger Bison, field harvesting a bison with a group of people intent on living closer to the land, to their food, and to each other. I would not have imagined that I'd ever had the skills or courage to then teach those same wonderful people how to butcher part of that bison and take it home to their families. I would have imagined a lot less, because this type of life is hard to conjure up until you start to live it. And then you realize it's the only thing you want to do and the only way it ever could have panned out if this brief time on earth was going to be worth anything at all. And I just love that, because you're doing cool stuff to me, but I would have never guessed if somebody had asked me 5 years ago, what would I be doing? And so the question is, after all that yapping, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, geez. Well, I think it's changed over my life, obviously, but I had this conversation with someone recently about working with animals and doing slaughter and doing butchery, that it is sort of a version of kind of what I thought I'd be doing, when I was 11, 12 years old. And then I got really lost from it and then came back to it without really meaning to. So, I grew up in Central Oregon, a little bit outside of Bend, in a really, really small town called Powell Butte. It was basically a school and a church and a gas station and a blinking yellow light. And my best friend had a ranch, her family did. And I spent most of my time there and ended up raising sheep for 4-H and was just so happy. So in my element. And yeah, being outside, being with animals, it was all I wanted to do. I didn't really have any vision of what I would look like, when I was older. I wanted to be a marine biologist pretty bad.
Yeah.
That was stuck in my head. I was never that good at science. I thought I was never that good at science. Now that I am, looking at science that applies more to what I do, I realize I'm not terrible at it. I just wasn't taught very well. But yeah, being outside, being around animals was always something I was super interested in, but I don't know, I never really had a real set goal. But we moved when I was about 13, and we actually moved to Bend, and I got really deep into skiing. Mm-hmm. And that kind of took over my life for, 15 years maybe, and kind of dictated my path. And finally, when I stopped skiing, it was when I had to figure out what I really wanted to do. And it was like my 12-year-old self was inside just trying to come out. And I finally listened to her. And that was when, when I was 12, if you had told me that I would have ended up slaughtering lambs instead of raising them, I would have been horrified, because I just, at the end of the fair, I'd be sitting there with my sheep just sobbing.
That was going to be my question. Yeah, I wrote that down because I've got an 8-year-old little girl, and I don't think she has yet to have like a real emotional reaction to thinking about killing animals to eat them. And like I've brought an elk home, and they've handled it surprisingly well. But I know at some point there's going to be that reaction. What was that like when you realize, when you're doing 4-H, you're connecting with these animals? Do you remember when you realized, all right, these things are all going to end up dead? Was that is that a memory you remember?
Not any specific memory. I think I knew pretty early on that was what happened to most of the animals that we were around. I remember seeing a gut pile in the driveway from one of the steers that my friend's family had, and knowing what happened, but not really seeing that process. And, they always had a freezer full of their own beef. So we knew who was who sort of in the freezer.
Sure.
But I knew from the start, I didn't like it, but it didn't seem like there was really any other choice. And I understood. They were my pets. I had Clover and Mia and Fletcher, and I remember them all so well. And I spent a lot of time with them. And then to sit there and know that the person that bought him my oxygen was probably going to eat him within the month, it was pretty horrifying. And I didn't eat lamb really until I was probably in my late teens or early 20s, and I ate it accidentally. I think my brother had a gyro in the fridge, and I ate it, and he was mad at me, and he's like, well, by the way, that was lamb. I was like, oh my God, that was really good. So from that point, I ate it accidentally, basically, and just stealing my brother's lunch. And and now, yesterday I butchered a 7-year-old mutton, and kept I've got about half a pound of mutton stew meat. It's for a friend, but yeah, and I was encouraging him to eat it. That this 7-year-old sheep, it's an organic ewe from a farm around here. And I'm like, it's going to be really good. And I love telling people that, because I know exactly the feeling of being hesitant to eat something, whether it's because you used to raise them or you've heard certain things about them or whatever. But yeah, I'm all in now.
Yeah. Well, I don't get it at the level you do, but just my experience elk hunting. I'm 45. I was 44 when I shot my first elk, and that has transformed. It was a transformational experience and a formative experience at age 44, which is cool. It's good to remember that you're never done with these transformational experiences, both for me and my family. So that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to chat with you, is just thinking more about that. But You mentioned you went hardcore into skiing and then you kind of refound your 12-year-old self. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about we could probably sit here and talk about skiing the whole time as well, but I'd love to hear about that transition out of being fully focused in on skiing to kind of having to leave that behind and move on to the next chapter.
Yeah. I mean, skiing in a weird way is it's the thing that brought me to doing this in a couple of ways, actually. The harder I think about it, it was a weird entry point into what I'm doing. But I went to college at University of Utah, and I went on the premise that I was going to be a film production major, but really I just really wanted to be skiing in Utah, and my parents went along with it. And took me like 6 years to graduate, and I switched majors a bunch of times and finally ended up a journalism major. By the time I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do and really no inclination to get a real job. So I continued working mostly in restaurants, like front of house stuff and coffee shops and working on the mountain. And I ended up going to Australia to spend a winter down there. And I worked at a restaurant at Thredbo Ski Resort. And the restaurant was run by this French guy named Jean-Michel. Mm-hmm. And I was just a server and a bartender. And he terrified me. He was really intense. He yelled a lot. He threatened to kill me more times than I can count.
For what? Like, what made him so mad?
I don't even know. Like, there would be a day that he decided we weren't throwing napkins away in the trash anymore. And so he's yelling at me in French not to throw napkins away. And I'm like, I don't know why you're yelling at me. And he would threaten he'd break a wine bottle and he'd tell me he was going to stab me with it. And it was like, I knew he was kidding, but there was part of me that thought he would maybe do it. And but his food was incredible. I mean, incredible. And his wife basically managed front of house and could kind of put out any of the fires that he started. And he was I didn't know at the time. Well, so I didn't have internet when I was down there, except
that's nice.
It was awesome. I mean, really the 6 months that I was there are like this magical time in my mind when I was disconnected from everything. And just like, I didn't have a car. You were kind of stuck up in this little village. And the reason I worked at the restaurant was because I needed housing. And that was the only way that I could find an apartment, was like to have it come through my employer, basically.
Yeah.
But I would go down to the hotel lobby and you could get spotty internet, and I would download books on my Kindle or iPad or whatever. And I downloaded Kitchen Confidential.
Oh yeah.
And I read it and I was like, oh my God, I get it. Jean-Michel is just a French chef. I mean, he's like doing the whole thing, right? Where it's really gnarly in the kitchen and people are yelling and there's threats of violence and whatever. But he was so intense about his food and he cared so much, and he was pissed when he thought that other people didn't care, which, fair enough. He had a bunch of like ski bums working for him. So, but after I read Kitchen Confidential, I was like, all right, I'm not going to be afraid of him anymore. He might have something to teach me. And so I would stay after service and sit and have a glass of wine with he and the other cook and Jean-Michel's wife. And by the end, we were sobbing when I had to leave. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. He became one of my really dear friends, and he really was the impetus for me being interested in food. And when I left Australia, I went directly to Spain and spent a few weeks there in the Basque region in San Sebastian. And,
had you ever been there before?
No, I never had any desire to go to Spain for some reason. I don't know. I took Spanish in high school and college, and I think I was kind of burnt out on that. And I thought, I'll never use this. I don't really care. And now I've been to Spain more times than I can count.
My wife just absolutely, she studied abroad there and just loves it. I've never been, so I need to go.
Where did she study?
Sevilla.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been down there. Yeah. To the south. I've spent a ton of time in Barcelona, some in Madrid, and a lot on the like Basque coast, but you should go. It's
all doing food stuff there.
Yeah, mostly. Well, so when I went to Spain, I was dating a guy whose family was from San Sebastian. And so we went and just spent a few weeks there, and my mind was blown by the food. And really the history of food is what sparked this interest in me, where it was learning about the reasons that they ate all these different things. And I then came back and I was I moved back to Utah after that, but I read Mark Kurlansky's Basque History of the World.
Oh, I've heard that. I love that guy, but I have not read that one. And people keep telling me I need to read it. I've read Salt and Cod and all that stuff, but not that one.
Yeah, no, it is fantastic. I think it was the first of his books that I read. It's fantastic. And it ties in with Salt and Cod exactly because, I mean, the Basque are known for bacalao, which is salt cod. And this whole idea that, the Vikings may have come down and taught the Basque people how to make salt cod, and then the Basque people could go on longer whaling journeys, and then that they were likely some of the first people, Europeans at least, to land on North America. And I was just so fascinated that food drove all of these massive shifts. And so I came back and I was like, I want to write about food history. And I didn't really know how I was going to do that. It was a couple more years until I ended up back in Oregon, and there was a culinary school in Bend, Cascade Culinary Institute. And so I applied and went in there. Oh my God, those first few days, I was so nervous. And all we were doing was like dicing carrots. And I could have thrown up. I was so nervous. Because I couldn't even scramble eggs. I mean, I did not know how to cook. I didn't know what I was doing. And there were people in there that worked in nice restaurants already and were just, kind of going through the motions to get a degree. And
how did they treat you?
So, I mean, I was expecting it to be kind of like the movies where, people are yelling, and there's sort of like my restaurant experience and with
breaking
Jean-Michel,
bottles and brandishing them at your neck.
Exactly.
You could have done that. You could have done that at the school. You could have been that person.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is not, turn it around. We're not.
So you guys don't know anything. I'm from the hard streets of Australia.
Exactly. They call it, in Australia, when you break a bottle and injure someone with it, it's called glassing, and it's like a thing. Like
it happens enough to have a name.
Exactly. It's a thing. And at some of the bars, you can't buy drinks in glass bottles after a certain time in the night, because that seems to be when people get rowdy. And
Australians are rowdy, man.
Oh my God. Yes. I thought my college experience was crazy, but Australia was a party in itself. It was so fun. I loved being down there, but culinary school. So no, I went in and I was so nervous, and I thought that I'd probably get screamed at, and it couldn't have been more opposite. It was a small school. It was fairly new. The chefs and the teachers were just some of the most wonderful people, still some of my really good friends, and a really small cohort that went through. And man, we bonded really hard, because you're there from about 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You have usually 3 classes a day, and they're all 4 hours long.
When you went there, what was did you have a goal? I mean, you wanted to write about food, but like, was there a specific type of cooking or skill that you were especially excited to learn? Or was it more just like, I just want to go and get the whole experience?
I don't think I knew enough to even have had a goal like that. It was mostly just like, I don't feel comfortable trying to write about food when I can't cook and I don't know anything. And so why not throw myself into this and find out if I actually like it and if I'm any good at it. And I still, to this day, I don't consider myself a very good cook. I enjoy doing it. I really actually got into the baking side of things. So I kind of took all the courses on both the culinary side and the baking and pastry side. And I came out of there having a real obsession with baking bread. And the butchery class piqued my interest too. That was, I don't know how much I learned in the butchery class. I just knew that it was something that like aesthetically, I thought it was really beautiful. I liked the physicality of it. And that just kind of stuck with me and ended up being the thing I pursued.
Here's another question for you. You're the second person in like 2 months who's doing this really cool stuff that has a background in pastry. I guess, what do you got? Pastry making, pastry chef training. And there's a woman that was on the podcast named Kathy Sever, who has this really cool company in Austin called Fort Lonesome, where they make all this chain stitch Western wear. And she was a pastry chef before she started doing that. And it seems like, and just in talking to people for a long time, there are a lot of really interesting people that have backgrounds in pastry, being a pastry chef. What's that all about? Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And thinking about the people that were in my classes that were really good at pastry and really deep into that, and even my chefs and professors, there's a real discipline that you have to do that. And you're going to fail a lot, basically. Mm-hmm. And failure when you're doing pastry is usually pretty epic, because you can't, once something's gone into the oven, or once you've, tried to make a diplomat cream or pastry cream or something, once you screw it up, it's really hard to fix. And so you learn these rules about how to make these things. And then once you learn the rules, you can learn to break them, mm-hmm. I think. And so I think it follows through with a lot of people in terms of kind of how you live your life, where you're like, okay, well, there are these certain rules that are maybe I have to follow or that are real. And then there are some rules and then there are some rules that I can break. And so I think in terms of, creative endeavors, after you're doing that, and just the way you live your life, it's like, okay,
that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, I've failed epically. I've learned how to fix it. I know there are some rules that I can't break, but there are all these rules that I can break. So let's see what I can do, sort of thing.
That's super cool. That's very similar to what Kathy said, because I asked her the same question. And I think you think about in sports like basketball, there are these fundamentals you have to know, dribbling, shooting, passing. But once you nail those fundamentals down and get really, really good at them, then there's room to improvise. But it's hard to do it. You can't start improvising without those skills.
Right.
So the taking the butchery class piqued your interest. So when did you how soon after taking that were you like, all right, this is something that I can really lock in on? I want to pursue this. I want to follow this and learn more.
So I did my first year of culinary school, and I don't know that I even took my butchery class in that year. I think it was in my second year after we had done all the foundation classes. But during my second year of culinary school, I had also started grad school. So I was doing my first year of grad school and second year of culinary school in conjunction.
Damn.
It was insane. I was also managing the restaurant at the culinary school and teaching hospitality classes, just because I had worked front of house so much. I don't know how it was, 14-hour days and just cramming everything in. But I was so excited about what I was doing that it didn't even cross my mind that it was kind of hectic.
How did that compare to other experiences you'd had? Because, it seems like you go all in and you're enthusiastic about what you're doing. And I'm sure you were enjoying, your time when you were really, really focused on skiing. But how did that stretch when you're working these 14-hour days? Your overall contentment or the fulfillment you're getting from your work, how did that compare to the previous years? Or had you had that feeling all along?
I think, when I was skiing a lot, I often had two jobs. I would work at a coffee shop super early in the morning and then ski, until afternoon, and then go be a hostess or a waitress in the evening. And I have pictures of calendars from that time, and there's 20 days straight without a day off. And at that time, I was so focused on skiing, and it was the thing that that just got it. It was all I thought about. I remember at some point thinking, if people don't ski, I truly do not understand what they do with their life. Because it was, I couldn't imagine that you could be happy without ski, and that was, in my early 20s. And I remember feeling that way. And now it's okay, I understand how people have a life outside of that. But that's where my head was at, it was all I wanted to do. All my best friends were doing it. It was all consuming, and I was having a great time, but it became to be it wasn't very fulfilling. I didn't feel like I was doing anything useful or helpful, which had always been something in the back of my head that I thought, whatever I end up doing, I want it to be helpful to someone or useful.
Sure.
And it started to feel kind of selfish. And, part of the reason that I kind of started to distance myself from skiing was that I had quite a few friends die from different ski accidents. And it just was like, I don't want to push this anymore. I want to be around. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get killed. I was started to have a really hard time with all that. So I really needed to separate myself. And then, getting into food, it was another thing that became all consuming. And I would wake up excited to go to class, even though it was 4:30 in the morning, and I'm definitely not a morning person, but it was all I could think about. And I was just buying cookbooks and books about food. And it was all I thought about. And I didn't even question it for a second. So
I love that. And I think what you said about, you don't understand you didn't understand how people couldn't be obsessed with skiing and live a happy life. I think if you zoom out though, I have a similar thing, just it's more broad, but I don't understand if people don't have something like a hobby or some sort of obsession or something that they're focused on, and it doesn't have to be your job, but just something that really drives you. I truly don't. I say that to my wife all the time. I'm like, I don't understand. I don't what do people think about? I'll see people just kind of wandering around, not, just kind of dragging their feet and mouth kind of half cocked open, wandering around. And I'm like, what do they I wonder what that person's thinking about right now. And I'm not trying to be judgmental or an asshole or anything, but I really do think having something that you're kind of obsessed with, if you're wired a certain way, it's a mandatory part of life, I think. And I'm a weirdo. I'm half crazy. So I don't know.
No, I totally agree. And I think a lot of the problems that we have, as a society right now is that a lot of people don't have that, whether it's their job or outside of their job. It's like, you're trying to get through the day. It ends up being, that's why sports teams are so huge, I think. And the Super Bowl is what it is. And athletes get paid what they do because that is a thing that people become obsessed with, right? It's a thing outside of themselves, outside of what they're doing. And I think that now, consumption has kind of become a hobby.
I agree. 100%.
Yeah. It's like something that your brain gets a little hit from, and then that becomes the thing. Consumption in all sorts of, manners. But yeah, I think that that's a huge issue right now for a lot of people. And a lot of it's like between skiing and getting into food, there were some years there that were really, really hard. And I was super depressed because I felt totally lost. I didn't even know where to start in terms of finding sort of what was next, and not even what I was good at, but just something that I was interested in. And it was rough. I mean, I was working retail and I hated that. And so I know that feeling. I deeply know that feeling of being totally lost, and you go to work and you come home and you're like, what now? And I do feel bad for people that feel like that, because it doesn't feel good.
Well, I mean, it's hard to, I think, at least in my experience, it's hard to kind of remove yourself from your own situation and realize all right, how did I snap out of this, or what did I do? But if somebody were to come to you that's in a similar situation, and I think I've been in that situation for longer than I'd like to admit. I had, years ago, but if somebody came to you and they're like, they explained that and you identified with it, what advice would you give them? Because they see you, they're like, oh, she's got it made. She's figured it out. She's doing this work she's passionate about, but it wasn't, you had some hard times. What would be your advice to somebody who's asking you, how do I snap out of this?
I think I would ask what sparks their interest, but makes them afraid. What is something that you're interested in, but too afraid to try? That's probably what you should pursue.
That's
because
cool.
All the things that have pushed me further in everything I've wanted to do have been the things I was most afraid of, but couldn't stop thinking about. And I think a lot of people have a thing that, whether maybe it's like doing art and you're afraid that you're going to be bad at it, but you keep thinking that you might want to try it. Do it. Do it. You're not going to fail. You might find something out about yourself. And it might take you down a totally different path. I mean, when I started culinary school, I really thought that I would be writing, I would just be combining my journalism degree and what I knew about food. I never in a million years would have thought that I would now be, basically my job is to do slaughter. I wouldn't have guessed. And that has only come about by following the things that scared me.
Yeah. And really, like you think about everything from the wild Frenchman in Australia, that's probably pretty scary, to showing up at culinary school. I mean, it's one thing after another. And then, that doesn't even take into account how hard you push yourself skiing, where that, there's real risk there. I
was skiing park mostly when I was doing that. So it was a lot of crashing. And that definitely, it's like now if I fail, I'm at least not going to probably hit my head too hard or like blow out a knee. I'm just going to maybe look stupid, which it's like, that's fine. I can deal with
that. I think that's wonderful advice. I never thought about it that way, but I think that's when I think about my weird twisting journey, a lot of it is just like, screw it, just try it, even though I'm scared. And I'm generally like, I've taken all these personality tests, like Enneagram, and it says like everything in my life revolves around fear. And when I first read it, I was like, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. But I think it's kind of true, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can revolve around fear, but it can revolve around it in a positive way, right? Like conquering those fears, and then maybe it's revolving around it, but you're making it positive, I guess. Like I one of my favorite things to do is to travel by myself. And the first time I did it, I went to London, which I was like, all right, I can deal with this. I speak the language. It's not super scary. And since then I've really pushed myself. And a couple summers ago, I went to Slovakia and Hungary by myself. And I was really scared. I was really nervous the whole time. And then you keep pushing these boundaries. And it's like, yeah, maybe that did revolve around fear and like trying to push past it. But
what's the scariest thing that has ever happened to you in international travel?
Honestly, flying. There have been 2 flights that were very sketchy, and I don't like flying anyway, so that sticks out in my mind. I have to trick myself, and I get on a plane and I just say over and over again how much I like flying. And I know it's not true, but I can trick myself for a while. And once we're in the air and we're going and I can focus on other things, I'm good. But there were 2 flights. One, I was flying to Berlin, and another one flying out of Bilbao, that were the 2 scariest flights I've ever been on. But like that stuff that's out of my control, being by myself in Slovakia or Hungary or any of these other places, I've never felt any fear when I'm there, other than just having to like force myself to go find a restaurant and, eat by myself there and figure out how to order off the menu, but nothing actually scary.
So one of the things that like, I feel like in a lot of situations or ways, I was kind of like a late bloomer in a lot of things, and international travel was one. I still haven't traveled extensively, but my wife and I, right after we got married, we lived in Costa Rica for a year, and I'd never like really been that much out of the country. And next thing you know, I'm living in this, different country. And I really think of that as one of the most important experiences in my life for a million reasons, getting out of the United States and being able to see the United States from the outside in. So are there any lessons, like major takeaways from all these travels that you've done? Because that's one thing I really want my daughters to have, is a lot of experience with international travel, just because of all the benefits that come with it. So like when you think about, if you had to boil it down to why do you travel? How has your life improved because of all this really cool international travel you've done? Do any major lessons come to mind?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound really trivial, but it really speaks to kind of how I feel about all of it. Going to different grocery stores in different countries and seeing none of the brands that I'm used to. Mm-hmm. I remember the first time that happened, I think I was in Germany. My family went on a big like European vacation when I was 17 or 18, and seeing this entire grocery store with not a single brand I recognized and being like, oh my God, this is people's normal day to day. And their world is so different than mine. Like, I think that the way I live is the way everyone lives. And everyone eats the same kind of food and drinks the same soda and whatever. And, you know, I was 17, so I didn't know much of anything, but it just, I think that speaks to what international travel does, where you start to see that what you think of as the hard and fast rules about the world and about how people live or should live or what it looks like day to day for people, you realize sometimes it feels like you're on a different planet than, you know, than what you're used to. And you're going to be wrong about a lot of things. And that has been probably the biggest thing for me, is finding joy in being wrong and kind of seeking that out and having a perception of a place and being totally surprised by it. And now in my daily life, like having ideas about things and being really shocked to learn that I'm totally wrong about it is now something that I like. I don't know, maybe I get a little dopamine hit from it or something, but it's like, I really seek out information and places and people that will push back on my version of the world. Cause the more you travel and the more you see, the closer you get. I don't know that there's any one version of truth, but if there is, or if there's you know, you're getting closer to a truer version of who you are on this planet and where you fit in and what the world is about. And I think it's invaluable.
I love that. And I love what you said about wanting to be wrong. There's this guy, I listened to his podcast, I read all his books, named Sam Harris, and he talks about the need to change your mind. And he says, I don't want to be wrong for 1 second longer than I have to be. And I think about that a lot, because I think about things probably too much, and I read a lot and all that. And I establish these ideas in my head that are built on what I think is solid. But even then, I'm so psyched when I learn that I'm incorrect. You know, I mean, it's kind of the point of being alive, as far as I'm concerned, is like learning and learning where you're wrong and adjusting. I mean, think how boring it would be if you had it all figured out now. That would suck.
Exactly. I remember being in my early 20s and thinking like, all right, I think I got this thing mostly figured out. You know, I was out of college and I was skiing and I was like, life is good. It's not that hard. Everything's fine. And then, you know, everything comes crashing down around you multiple times. And and every day I'm just like minute by minute baffled and delighted and sometimes horrified by everything that's going on. And man, if I thought I had it figured out, then what's the point, you know? And
there is no point. And it's funny because we're in this point in time where people just they get locked into their thoughts and their ideas. And I don't know, it shows you what happens when you get locked in. It's not good. And I want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Matt Skoglund, because I over prepare for these interviews. And he was like, you don't need to prepare. Y'all are just going to start talking and it's going to be awesome. And he was exactly right. Yeah. But to veer it back towards your current career, butchery. I feel like on Meet the Parents when he said carpentering, and Owen Wilson's like, do you mean carpentry?
Butchery is a weird word. But yeah, people often will say, is that what I'm supposed to say? I'm like, you know butchery. What? I think so. Yeah, I don't.
Well, when did you go all in? Like, when was it that I've read, there's a really great article that I'll link to, a profile of you. I think it was in is it pronounced Deseret News? And that they're talking when you were working at the Amsterdam meat shop in Montana, but like when did you fully go in, like commit to a career devoted to butchery?
I mean, I don't know. I'd say the full commitment came when I actually walked into the butcher shop and said that I wanted a job, but it took a while to get there. I mean, like so I finished culinary school and then I went on to do my second year of grad school and I moved to Portland. And I was lucky enough to be able to meet Camus Davis, who has a good meat project and the Portland Meat Collective, and was connected with her through one of my chefs, Chef Erickson, at school, and got to kind of see what she was doing and was really inspired by that. And then decided that Portland wasn't really where I wanted to be, mostly just the traffic was driving me nuts. And I love Oregon. I love Bend and Portland and that whole area, but I just needed to be somewhere bigger and quieter and sort of, I knew that I needed to keep focusing on this butchery thing. And I was getting more and more interested in on-farm slaughter and talking to ranchers. And then I don't know why I had never thought of it, but I decided I wanted to learn how to hunt as well. And Montana popped up on my radar. And I had been to Bozeman a few years before, and my dad's family is from Butte. And so we spent some time out here when I was younger, and I came back out here and looked around, and without knowing anyone, found a roommate on Craigslist and got a house, and ended up, I kind of taught myself how to hunt. I didn't own any guns up to that point, and figured out what I needed to buy, and had a friend who she was just kind of starting out too. And we sort of started hunting together and shot my first deer. And I just thought, basically doing that first hunt, my first successful hunt, was sort of, it was going to open or permanently shut the door to what I thought I wanted to do. I thought, if I can, because I hadn't, other than, doing some chicken slaughter, I hadn't actually killed anything. And I thought, if I hate this, then I'm going to have to rethink what I'm doing. And I shot the deer, and I've never felt, I kind of wonder if you felt this way too, the sense of relief that I felt. And like, I'm a very anxious person. I felt a lot of the anxiety that I've carried around my whole life just leave my body.
Really?
And yeah, it was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this thing that was really hard to learn. I can do something I didn't think I could do. I can provide for myself. I can provide for other people. Like, I just found out something huge about myself. And it was this massive wave of relief. And after that, I thought, well, I started talking to people about doing wild game processing. I was so new to town. I really didn't know the landscape of who was doing what as far as butchery, slaughter, even who any of the ranchers were. And so I just kind of put out feelers and met a lot of people. And that's when I met Matt Skoglund. We had coffee and kind of chatted about what he was doing. And finally, after many Zoom calls through COVID of talking about, we need to open a new slaughter plant. There needs to be more meat processing. And some of that started to die off. And I had just heard about this shop over in Amsterdam, which is just 35 minutes or so outside of Bozeman. And the manager at the time, this guy, Bill Jones, he's just fantastic. And I walked in there and asked for a job, and he put me on the cutting table on my first day. And then I kind of just begged him to put me out on the kill floor. And finally, about 2 or 3 months in, he put me out there. Yeah. I thought it was something I wanted to do. And I had to see if I could do it. And turns out I was right.
So talk about the process at that particular place. Like how does that work? They've got, because in the article I read, it was saying that they had them set up outside the facility and they bring them in. Would you mind walking through that process?
Yeah, sure. So the kill floor is on one end of the building, and then the processing is on the other. And basically the whole thing is streamlined so that the carcasses that go into the cooler right after they're killed, then in the next few days get rotated through a series of other coolers until they get down to the cut floor. And our head butcher, who was this guy named Tom, really fantastic guy, taught me a lot. Now it's my friend Kyle. And so he'll end up with the cut instructions from whoever's getting it, whether it's, a retailer like a grocery store or a specific customer or whatever. And then they do cut and wrap and all that down there. But on the kill floor, starting at about 7 a.m., we have a list of people that will be dropping off for the day and how many they're bringing and of what and what time they're coming in. So it's kind of all organized. It's a series of corrals. There's 2 in the back and then a crowd. It's like a half circle with a crowd gate. So it's a gate that basically swings in a half circle, and we can push the animal into the kill box. But we basically, usually 2 days a week, we did beef. And then 1 day a week was lambs or pigs. And then maybe on Friday as well. But basically, yeah, whatever animal it was, if it was beef, we called it the beef box, and it was, I think it was custom made for that shop, and it's a Temple Grandin design. So she has come up with all kinds of designs to keep animals calm, when they're coming into slaughter. And so this beef box, it has little bars welded onto the floor to keep them from slipping. It has a hydraulic lift so that the side lifts up after they're stunned and they can roll out onto the floor. But they walk in, we shut the back behind them. They're not squeezed, but it's a fairly tight space. They stick their head through a little hole in the front, and it has a hydraulic thing that holds it steady. Mm-hmm. And then we have everything that we did at the shop there was a captive bolt. So it's just a blank that fires a rod, and you just hold it against their forehead, kind of a little bit below that little kind of curly little furry spot on their forehead. You make an X basically between their ears and their eyes, and where that X, where those lines meet, that's where you put that captive bolt down, fire that, and then immediately we cut their throats and bleed them. Because as far as the state's concerned, when you're using a captive bolt, it's a stun. It's not a kill. I mean, It definitely kills them, but you need a backup measure. So it's always a stun and then bleed them immediately so that they're definitely dead.
What was it like when you did that for the first time?
Oh God. Well, the first time being in there, I think we were killing pigs, and there's a lot of blood. I remember standing there and being like, okay, am I kind of trying to sense how I felt? Like, am I okay? Am I right? Yeah. Am I going to be good out here? And it was definitely a lot the first few times, and then kind of get used to it. But then the first time that I killed a beef, I was so nervous, and I got really lucky at that shop because I ended up dating the kill floor manager, and we now own 4 acres and 3 dogs together, and are trying to start our own mobile slaughter business. But he was so helpful in allowing me to do things that, had he not been there, it probably would have taken me a lot longer to learn them. He's a really good teacher, and he trained all of us that were out there and facilitated kind of everyone getting to do what they wanted to do, learn what they needed to learn. And I had been frustrated in the months leading up to being on the kill floor, and in my first few months there, I just felt like, because I was a girl, and because I was the only girl that worked on the processing side, and I felt like I had to prove myself, and that even when I felt like I was proving myself, it still wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like anyone was making conscious decisions. I looked different than the big guys out there, and I think there was some concern about me getting hurt during certain things, and it ended up being fine. And I was super lucky to have Jesse out there, and he saw that I was really interested in learning everything, and so he's just a fantastic teacher. So he showed me how to do it. I was shaking so hard and trying to be calm, because I was like, this is not about me. This is about the animal, right? Yeah, I need to do a good job for this animal, and everything went great. And now it's a weird thing to now when I do that, when I kill a cow or a sheep or whatever, I mean, it would be interesting. I don't think my heart rate goes up at all anymore, which feels good because it makes me feel confident that I can definitely do a perfect job.
Well, that's what you want in a pro, like you think about like an emergency room doctor. You don't want their heart rate coming up when the worst car wreck you could ever imagine rolls into that place. You want
like
calm.
They're getting an adrenaline rush, like, oh God, okay, like instead of just like this is routine. I know what to do, and some self-control there.
That's intense though. Like it is, I mean, you're a pro, and the thing is, like, any human being on earth that has consumed meat, somebody has done that. That's what was so that's what was so eye-opening to me with that elk hunt. Was I was like, for 44 years I've outsourced the violence and just the manual labor required to put this thing, because like the violence killing it. And then I went with this awesome guy named Adam Gall, and his wife is a butcher. And so we killed the elk, and then 3 days later, his wife, we spent 6-7 hours butchering it. And I
Cool.
was thinking, I have outsourced this my entire life. And anybody who gets like, I mean, it's normal to get squeamish, I think, hearing about it, but that's the reality. I feel like everybody who eats meat, I'm not going to like demand it, but I think it's a almost a necessary experience to actually do it yourself at least once.
Absolutely. I think seeing it or doing it yourself, it'll change the way you interact with your food. Honestly.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Like to me now, the idea of wasting meat is just, I just can't deal with it. Because I saw, especially if at the shop, if something happened and, the retail case went out and there's a couple steaks that we got to throw away. It's like, I watched the animal die. I skinned that animal, I gutted it. It's not just this monolithic meat that comes from nowhere. Those were all individuals. And to watch them die and to put your hands on all of them, and then to see not only the work that you did, but like the body of that animal go to waste after it didn't give its life. We took it, it wasn't up to the animal. And I have zero tolerance for that at this point. And I think people would too if they hunted or even seen slaughter. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not smart enough or poetic enough or whatever to really explain it. But it's just, I think it locks into some part of our DNA that goes back, 1 million, 2 million years of, getting food and for ourselves and our families. So during the time that you were working there, how did that what big lessons did you take away? Because I would think in a way it's almost like being, I mean, I know it is. It's like being a craftsman. But I feel like butchering animals, like Kate Kavanaugh, who's a mutual friend of ours, her partner, husband, Josh, I think he was a carpenter and then he kind of transitioned into being a butcher. And it's like, it's almost the reverse of being a carpenter. You're taking it apart instead of putting it together, but just doing it over and over and over and over and over again. Like, how did your skill level progress over time? And how do you feel like you're close to having it figured out? Or is it one of these things where it's like, now, just you've seen people that have done it for 40 years and that how hard it is to get to that level?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I miss most not being at the shop right now is being able to do so many animals every day. And you watch yourself get better every time. Cause man, skinning pigs is one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. And you compare someone who's doing it for the first time versus someone who's done it for a few years. And it's like, you're just like hacking into the fat and it's such a disaster. And I hated it. I hated skinning pigs. And now by the time I left, I was kind of the de facto pig skinner.
That's cool.
Yeah. I was the one that would end up doing it because everyone else, Jesse would kill them. They'd roll out of the box. We hang them up, bleed them, and then set them on. We have these cradles that are sort of like, it's like these metal bars in an X shape. So they just sit right on top. And yeah, I went from just dreading pig day to being pretty fast at it. And it ended up being my favorite thing. And man, I miss skinning pigs.
There are many life lessons wrapped up in that statement you just made, like that's the secret to life, I think. I love it when something
exactly.
like that. But if you could teach me how to love email, that would be great. Oh,
I don't think anything computer related. I'm way gone on.
Good.
Lost.
Don't get involved. So jumping ahead a bit, but it's something I'm interested in is your writing, particularly with MeatEater. And I'm amazed with the volume of writing you put out. I mean, it's a lot and it's all really, really good. And I'm just like when I clicked on your profile on the MeatEater, I'm like, wow, she's prolific. How did that relationship come to be?
With MeatEater. So I met Cal at a BHA, it was like a Campfire Stories event in Bend, I think.
Okay.
Probably, I want to say 5 years ago. Just met him briefly and said, I'm in Montana and interested in butchery and just thought I'd say hi. And then we met up and got coffee at some point or kind of started to become friends. And then he's such a busy guy, but he really made time for me in terms of kind of introducing me to Steve. And I ended up going, actually my first hunt was with MeatEater. We went out to Michigan on that back 40 project that they did.
Yeah, I saw that video with Mark Kenyon. Who's Mark and I? We've had like 3 or 4 podcast conversations. He's awesome. I don't know Cal, but I know Mark's great.
Yeah, Mark is awesome, and Cal is fantastic. And they just rolled out the red carpet for me, and it was so fun. And it was muzzle loader season, and I had probably shot a gun 5 times at that point. So we didn't end up seeing any deer. We didn't end up doing anything much hunting, but it was the first time I had ever like sat outside with the intent of trying to shoot a deer, which was huge for me because I'd never done that before. So yeah, I got to meet those guys and do all that. And then when Danielle Pruitt started, basically MeatEater totally incorporated Wild and Whole.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of years ago as like their full food side of things. She reached out and asked if I would write for them because she and I had talked a little bit and we kind of had a similar view on food and hunting and all that. So yeah. And I mean, again, if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be writing for MeatEater, I probably wouldn't have, I don't know. I hadn't hunted at that point. So it wasn't even in the cards.
The thing that strikes me, and it's a recurring theme on this podcast, is how you were able to build all these relationships in Montana and the Bozeman area relatively quickly. And I feel like everybody I've had, whether you're talking about people doing conservation deals to journalists, to writers, to artists, so much of it comes down to their ability to build relationships with people. And, and I just feel like that's very impressive to me as pretty much a hardcore introvert, that you were able to roll into Bozeman and make such meaningful relationships with really cool people that are doing really cool work. And the people that are very busy, and so you put out I think it's your curiosity, I think that curiosity, when people are genuinely curious, that's an attractive. I love being around people like that. And it seems like you're hardcore when it comes to curiosity.
It kind of hamstrings me sometimes because I'm looking around my room right now and I think there's 40 books just laying around
we're the same.
Bed.
I'm looking at a stack right here and I hadn't read any of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I get about a quarter of the way through and I'm like, that was super interesting. I bet this other book is really good too. And I end up, it drives me insane. It's so stupid. But yeah, it's the same thing with kind of everything that I do. I mean, right when I moved to Bozeman, I didn't have a job for a little bit. And then I ended up cooking at a food truck in town and, met people that way that would come up every day and I'd cook for them. And then through that ended up cooking at a restaurant in town here, Blackbird, which when I moved here was my favorite restaurant. And then I was so nervous I was so nervous to go drop off my resume at Blackbird. And now, I mean, it's like some of my best friends.
Isn't that wild? Do you think,
yeah.
I feel like it's almost like that nervousness. I mean, you kind of already said this, but like, that's the sign that you should do it. And it's so, I think in general, like half of my first instincts on what I should do, it's actually like whatever my first instinct is, do the opposite.
Totally. If you're like, all right, no, I'm too nervous, I'm not going to go do it, then you definitely have to go do it. And you'll learn to kind of read that fear, because I relate it to skiing a lot, where it's like there would be a jump or a rail or something that I was so afraid of. And it was because something in my brain knew that I was capable of it. Mm-hmm. And it would like kind of make me mad that I knew I could do it, but I was so afraid of it. But then there were things, like really big cliffs or really big jumps that didn't scare me because it wasn't even something that I was going to try.
Yeah.
Right? Like some things where it's like, that's fine. I'm not ever going to try that. I'm not even scared about it because it's not really even in my wheelhouse. So that makes me think if I am scared, something in me knows that I could probably do it or that I should maybe try it rather than just saying, don't even try because you'll probably die,
I've never thought about it that way, but I think you're exactly right on that. That's really interesting way of thinking about it. Because you're never like the insane stuff that never crosses your mind. You're not nervous about that,
right? Because you're like, I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't even try.
Wait, so what else? So you're writing for MeatEater, Forage Fed. Tell me about that.
That I kind of started. It's it's been a project of mine that I haven't really known what to do with. COVID kind of put a damper on it for a little while, but when I was done with grad school, I was having a really hard time finding a job that incorporated all the things that I really cared about. And I knew I probably wasn't going to find something that really brought all of that together. There were, working at the butcher shop brings part of that, and writing for MeatEater is part of that. But doing Forage Fed it's basically been me teaching butchery classes and really making them, instead of just broad butchery, making them really specific to the time and the place and the animal and the people that I'm talking to. And so like with Matt Skoglund, he did a bison field harvest with the One Montana Master Hunters group. And then the next week I taught a butchery class to those same people. That was, I think, what that Instagram post was about that you read.
Yep.
And looking at the bison that we were butchering in terms of where it came from and what it ate and what its presence on that landscape means for Montana and for hunters and ranchers and meat production, and really taking a look. So after I went to grad school the program was called Food Systems and Society. So it was like social issues within the food system.
Okay.
And after that, I got a graduate certificate in natural resource policy, because in my mind, they're like food policy and natural resource policy ends up being the same thing.
Yep.
And so being able to teach butchery, which is food policy, but relating that back to natural resource policy in terms of, Matt now has a conservation easement on his land, and it's habitat for all these different animals, game and non-game species alike. And just every choice that we make in all of these different realms affects the other thing. Like nothing exists in a vacuum. And so that has kind of been what I've tried to teach through Forage Fed.
That's really interesting. So if people want to, look that up or get involved or in one way or another, learn more about it, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably my personal Instagram, which is just Anna Borgman. I have a Forage Fed Instagram that I need to get better at updating.
No, you don't. Don't waste time on Instagram.
That's fair. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Although your Instagram though, this morning when I was reading it, I was like, this is what I like. Like, this is really like your writing is awesome. And it made me feel good. I learned stuff. Like you do Instagram the best possible way it can be done. I'm not blowing smoke or exaggerating. Like I love what you have on there, but at the same time, I can't ever in good conscience, recommend people spend more time on Instagram, myself included.
Yeah. Oh man. Instagram is a real love-hate thing for me. Cause like you're talking about, relationships, and there are so many things that I never would have been able to do. Probably talking to you,
Oh yeah. Same with you and Matt and everybody. Yeah. Same thing.
And it drives me nuts. I'm so grateful for it because the opportunities that come from it and the friendships and relationships and all that. But yeah, it's just like, how do you balance that with the time suck and the life suck that social media is? I don't know.
It's tough. Speaking of the exact opposite of social media, you've already mentioned a lot of good books. I know that's one thing Matt clued me in on that I picked up on, that you love to read. I'd love some book recommendations from you, or maybe like books that have played an important role in your life, and then just any cool books you've read recently. I feel like we could probably do a full hour talking about books between the two of us.
I think we definitely could. Two books that I'm reading right now are Raw Deal by Chloe Sorbino. It is fascinating. She basically wrote a much better book of a book that I always think in my head that I'll write, but she looks at the economics of meat production basically, and the collusion and the corruption and among the big processors, and sort of what some potential solutions are. And it is so interesting. One thing that I was just up at Old Salt talking to those guys and we were talking all things slaughter and selling meat and all that, but just like trying to figure out what to do with what basically in the industry they call it the drop. It's the head, the organs, the hooves, and the hide. And really what these big meat processors are making money on is that they're selling the byproducts of meat production. And that's how they artificially lower the price of meat.
Who do they sell it to?
All kinds of processors, people that will do something with the leather, people that will, make gelatin from the hooves,
okay.
Dog treats from organs, all kind. I honestly don't really know because coming from small producers and small shops around Montana, we throw all of that away. I mean, like I have a few beef hides that I've saved just from kind of cool looking animals, but we threw almost every hide away. I'd say 99% of them. And we'd keep livers and hearts, kidneys and tongues, but all the other organs went in the trash and most of the heads and all the hooves. Yeah. So it's like this book has just been mind blowing. It's made me realize that basically the game that we're playing as small producers and small processors is not even the same game that the big guys are playing. It's really fascinating and frustrating.
I need to read that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The other one that I've been reading is called American Lucifers.
Never heard of that. I've never heard either.
It's so good. It's, what is it? The Dark History of Artificial Light. And so he's looking at basically how artificial light came to be. And I'm only about maybe a third of the way through it, but talking about whaling and whale oil and the whole economy surrounding that. And then now that's got me reading Moby Dick. I mean, that's how like my reading list goes, that one thing sparks one thing and I end up with 40 books next to my bed. So
I read a book called The End of Night about light pollution. And it was so interesting. And I read it at the same time I was reading Pete McBride's new book about silence and just about how it is so hard to find any place on earth that has silence for more than like 5 minutes at a time because of airplanes, and then even like in the Himalayas. And then what all this artificial light has done just to humans and to everything from like the way plants grow to the way, animals migrate is really wild. And it's something I never considered. So we're on the same page there, but I had not read that one.
It's really fantastic. To your point about silence, I have had a map of Antarctica on my wall for probably 10 years now. I'm just like dying to go there because I've always had this desire to like that was where my interest in history came from. I've always had an interest in history, but like, what did it feel like before you had access to everything all the time? Before you could pretty much get on the internet almost anywhere, especially with, you've got Elon and Starlink and you'll have internet deep in the backcountry, which just, it's just like this existential thing. It's like, and I'm like, I get it that it's helping a lot of people in a lot of places that have not had access to this. And I selfishly would like to be someone who doesn't have access, which is a very, privileged position to take. But Antarctica has always been fascinating to me because I'm like, man, that would be the last sort of bastion of really. I'd love to go there.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's definitely roughing it. Speaking of the phones, kind of off the topic, but I lived in Costa Rica and then my wife and I went back like 2 or 3 years ago. And for the first time, like we're driving down the roads at night, there's very little artificial light or anything, but you could see houses kind of off the side of the road. And for the first time ever, I saw people like sitting on their porch and you could see the glow from the smartphone, like reflecting off of their face. And that brings a lot of good stuff. Internet, it helps in a lot of ways, but it was just it was such a striking thing to see driving down these roads in the middle of nowhere and you see that glow of the smartphone. So it's definitely coming. What do you do? Like, what's a guilty pleasure? I mean, it seems like everything you do is making the world better and you're reading these important books that are making you smarter. I mean, do you ever just like watch Netflix or space out on YouTube, or did you go see the Barbie movie?
Oh, I'm dying to see the Barbie movie. I'm dying to see it. I'm so excited.
By the time this publishes, you may have seen it already.
I hope I have. Well, my roommate's having a birthday party tonight and it's going to be a birthday or a Barbie themed birthday. So
oh, nice.
We'll at least have
Nice.
that going. Yeah. Yeah. But, no, I probably should, space out more. I have I feel guilty when I do it. And I don't know if guilty is a word. I just don't like it. I just don't like doing it. I don't like doing things that aren't like furthering what I'm trying to do, or I have a hard time reading fiction because I feel like I'm not learning anything.
We're the same person. Like everything you just said, I could have said it and it would have been 100% correct. Saying like a guilt of doing stuff that isn't pushing things forward, plus no fiction.
I don't know that it's super healthy, but it just kind of, and I didn't used to always be like that. I sort of think sometimes that, doing slaughter all the time and really being really close to death most days of the week has kind of messed with my perception of my own time and how I want to use it. And so, yeah, I found myself being a lot more mindful of what I'm doing with my time, how I am with other people. And it's been a real roller coaster of kind of emotions and different stages of thinking about death as I've done slaughter. But I'm at a point now where I really just don't want to waste time. And I'm like very grateful for the time that I have and for the people and the animals around me. But I don't know, like, I guess if I do anything, I love gardening. And I have a massive garden right now so hectic. It's all in pots because I'm moving in a couple weeks and I knew I was going to. So
wow. That's planning.
I have this mobile garden that I'm going to move. It's going to take like a U-Haul trailer to move it. But that is, I will spend a lot of money and a lot of time, like buying plants, picking out seeds, kind of just zoning out and watching the bees and the flowers. But yeah, I should probably zone out a little more.
No. Well, I don't know. I think that's the common narrative. Like, calm down. I mean, I hear that all the time. Like, relax, calm down. But I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I don't, and it makes I'm in a bad state when that happens. And I balance it out. I do my meditation. I chill. It's not like I'm manic, but I'm with you. I completely understand what you're saying. And there might be a lot of people that are like, these two or something's wrong with them, but I completely get it.
Well, I think it helps or it doesn't help. I don't know that, my boyfriend we worked at the slaughterhouse together and we actually both quit at the same time. But he makes knives and, he's just constantly doing that. And so that kind of kicks my butt into gear where, I'll be kind of hanging out for a minute. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's got 15 knives that he's working on and he never, ever stops. And he was a Marine.
Oh man. I just read Mattis's memoir and I'm obsessed with Marines right now. I
read that so bad.
It's really good. Really good.
Really.
And my next door neighbor, a guy just moved in next door and he's a Marine. And I'm kind of like starstruck by him.
I know. It's like, it's a whole different world. And it has been so interesting being with someone who has that mentality. And it's been very helpful. He can't sleep in and he's constantly going. And his motto is, basically just embrace the suck, which I can be a big complainer. I'll go along with things and I'll get it done, but I'll probably whine about it a little bit. And it's been helpful to have him around because he doesn't whine about anything. So I've kind of learned to pick my battles.
Yeah. Marine is probably, of everybody in the United States, Marines are probably the least interested in hearing complaining, I would guess. Yeah. Which is awesome. I need a partner like that.
Yeah, he often asks me if I'm on fire, and I say no. And he's like, "All right, well, let's move forward from there." Damn it. Okay,
all right, last question, and I've taken more of your time than I intended to, so thank you so much for being so open and generous with your time. But
this has been great.
I often think about this podcast as an instruction manual to my 23-year-old self who was sitting there in Merrill Lynch wearing a suit and cufflinks and trying to be, real grown-up, responsible young man. But he wanted to do cooler stuff. And he would look at people like you and be like, how do you live a life like that? How do you end up doing this kind of stuff? And you've already given out so much wisdom, but any kind of final thoughts, for the people that listen to this podcast, just words of wisdom, final thoughts?
Oh gosh. I mean, it definitely takes practice. Takes practice to like live the life you want. You know, you have to keep taking steps and doing things that move. You're not going to figure it out all at once. There's this quote that I can't find it now, but it's like, don't burden yourself by imagining your whole life at once, because you're not going to be able to. I mean, the 5-year plan, you know, I've never had one. I won't ever have one because I can't, because I would be, I think, doing myself a disservice to try to plan 5 years ahead. And I don't know, I've always had a hard time following the rules. Even I try really hard, and now I've kind of given up trying, because I realize like I can still be successful even if I'm not doing it on other people's terms. Yeah, I think at this point I'd say just like get off the internet, because not only is it wasting your time, but you're not, it's telling you what to think. And I think a lot of people think they want to be told what to think, when really you can figure it out for yourself. And spending time alone, and whether it's in your backyard or if you want to buy a ticket to Hungary and, you know, figure your shit out there, spending time alone with your thoughts, I think is also painful for a lot of people, but it's the only way you're actually going to know what you think and how you feel. And it might be hard at first, but like the anxiety that I think a lot of people feel is because they don't know what to think. And we're all being told that what we're doing is wrong, or what we're doing, you know, you could be doing it better. You could look better. You could eat better. You should eat this way. You should think this way. You should vote for this person. It's like, just you have to shut it all out and figure out what you think, and then come back to it and learn to think critically about it. And I don't know, I think alone time and less internet time.
I'm with you on that. Other than the internet that put this podcast on your phone that you're listening to right now, but every other kind of internet.
Yeah, listen to podcasts, maybe check Instagram. No, yeah.
Anna, you are so great. This is so fun. Everybody, I'm sorry it took so long to make this happen, but I've been looking forward to it, and I'll look forward to hanging out in person one of these days. But really, you're doing awesome work, and I'm really glad to know you. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number three, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number four, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. But thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists, with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.